This is the Neumann U87Ai. And in just a second, I'm going to run you through my entire signal chain that I use in tandem to process it with the Universal Audio Apollo Twin X. Also later on, I'm going to let you have a listen at a direct comparison of this microphone completely wet and processed versus totally dry. But first, a little bit of a background. I've had this now for about 8 months. It replaced a Neumann TLM-103 that also used to be in this very same position. I loved that microphone a lot. I like this one just a little bit more. They're very similar, but let me explain the biggest difference that I've noticed in time. This microphone has a bit more of a polished high and low end. It also has a more obvious mid-range that the 103 does not present. And that's why this microphone takes to equalization quite well. It's an everyday mic. It's a forever mic, and now I'm going to show you how I process it. So a total of 4 plugins that I'm using with Universal Audio. First off, the Unison preamp, which is the solid-state Logic 4000E channel strip. I'll run you top to bottom. I'm gained on this mic at 30.1 dB. Not using any compression with this channel strip, but I am using a significant amount of expansion. You'll see here when I stop talking, it takes away about 6 dB. This is not a necessarily noisy microphone, nor is my room that noisy, but I really like to get it as silent as possible when I'm not talking. In terms of a low cut, not doing anything here. On the high side, I am cutting at about 16,000, just trying to get all the highest frequencies out of there. Then we get to the EQ, which I am using here on the channel strip, my first of 2 EQ phases. Overall, what you're going to see here is a little bit of equalization with the channel strip, then compression, then a little bit more equalization with the Neve 1073, and then finally compression at the very end with the Teletronics LA2A. But back to the EQ here on the SSL, I'm boosting on the high side at just above 5,000. It's probably about 5,500 there where I'm boosting to about 4 dB. So that gives a little bit more presence in the speech range, but you'll also notice here on a very narrow Q at about 6,500 for sibilance, I'm taking away right there. On the low mids at about 250, call it 270. That's where I notice my voice and this microphone create a very boxy effect. So I'm taking out pretty aggressively there. It is a narrow Q, but I am taking out about 6 dB right there. Then on the low side, I'm bumping up at about 100 hertz. 3 dB. Now this is on a bell curve, so you're not getting a shelf at the bottom. You're getting the bell curve. And that brings me to the 1176 here. So my first round of compression on this microphone, and the input and output, you can see the settings here. Those are not numerically linked to decibel values, but that's how I have it set. Low on the input for noise, and the output is what it is. You can see that my gain reduction is actually taking effect here and there, not always. In fact, if I'm soft on the voice, you can see it's not moving much. But as soon as I get loud and animated, all I'm using the 1176 LN for, low noise by the way, is to tame the peaks. This is the first chance to get any of those transients out of there to try and give me a decent and consistent amount of levels here. Next up on the signal chain is the Neve 1073. Now this is the legacy version of the plugin. There's also a more complex and detailed version. This is the more simple one. I'm not gaining up here at all. You can see on the high shelf, I am boosting to the tune of about 4 dB. Then in the mids, I'm actually taking away at 1.6, so 1600 hertz. I'm taking away about 2 dB. Again, it's just that attempt at a little bit of boxiness here to remove in a spot that I found it. And then on the low side at 60 hertz to give it that sub bass here in the voice, I am boosting to about 4 dB. Now you're noticing that I'm boosting the lows in 2 different places. Here at 60 hertz, also on the channel strip at about 100 hertz. Again, different places, those are different boosts. And the last thing here you'll see with the 1073 is that I am employing a low filter here, a low cut filter for the first time you'll see in my chain at about 50 hertz. Probably lower than I need it to be. Could I bump it up to 80? I suppose. But I like to hear some sub-bass frequencies in the voice, and I'll record it this way. If I need to take out afterwards, that's a lot easier than trying to manufacture putting something back in. All right, now that brings me to the last thing here in the chain, almost the last thing, which is the Teletronics LA2A. And you can see where my gain and peak reduction are set. And you can see that this compressor is doing a little bit more work than the 1176. This one is putting on the final touch. I love the fact that as I'm talking here, at a normal distance, at a normal volume, that it's working between 0 and 2, maybe 3 dB right there. It's staying right in that range where I want it, giving me a nice waveform at the very end of all this. In fact, I can pull it up here if you like. You can see how this is looking as I'm recording it. But again, this is just a really nice glue effect to the final part of my signal chain where I basically go EQ, compression, EQ, a little bit more compression. Now, the last thing here that you're seeing on this strip that I'm not actually using right here is the ability to have a low cut and a high cut at the very end of all this. So beyond EQ, beyond boosting and cutting in other places, beyond compression in 2 places, if I want to cut at the very end, I can absolutely do that, but right now I don't have that on. Typically what I will use this for is a cut at about 100 and 15,000 at the very top, just to keep things nice and narrow. This is a sample of how the U87Ai sounds completely dry, no plugins, no equalization, no compression. I'm only boosting this to 36 dB on the preamp. As well, I'll fix it in post to level out the overall volume. The Neumann U87 is probably the best known and most frequently used studio microphone the world over. Its smooth and refined sound is as iconic as its elegant exterior design. The U87Ai is the standard microphone for speech and vocals. 3 polar patterns plus pad and low-cut options make it adaptable to a wide range of applications. And now back to Fully Processed. Introduced in 1967, it has shaped the sound of countless hit records for the past 50 years. And when those hits were announced on the radio, many a DJ sat before a U87Ai. The legend continues. To this day, no professional recording studio is complete without a Neumann U87Ai.